8-year-old exposes judge's 20-year murder secret in front of packed courtroom. The words hung in the air like a challenge thrown down before a king. I can read your mind. Judge Randall's laughter boomed through the mahogany-paneled courtroom, rich and dismissive, until it died in his throat like a strangled bird. The sound seemed to echo off the high ceiling, bouncing between the ornate columns before settling into an uncomfortable silence that made everyone shift in their seats. At the center of it all stood Amara, 8 years old and impossibly small against the towering authority of the bench. Her loose braids framed a face smudged with the grime of city streets, and her oversized blue jacket hung like borrowed wings from shoulders too thin for a child her age. Bare feet, silent as whispers, carried her closer to the man whose life she was about to unravel thread by thread. The judge's fingers tightened around his gavel until his knuckles showed white through the skin. Who brought this child here? His voice carried the irritation of a man whose carefully ordered world had been interrupted by something he couldn't immediately dismiss. The bailiff swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing nervously. She asked for you, sir. She wouldn't speak to anyone else. And why is that? Amara lifted her chin with the quiet dignity of someone who had seen too much, her brown eyes locking onto his with an intensity that made something cold crawl up Randall's spine. Because I can read your mind, she said, her voice soft as falling leaves. The silence that followed was broken by a ripple of laughter from the gallery, nervous chuckles that grew bolder when the judge himself leaned back in his leather chair and let out a sharp bark of amusement. You can read my mind. That's cute, little one, but this isn't a stage for childish games. But Amara remained still as carved stone, her gaze never wavering. You don't believe me, she whispered, and somehow her quiet words carried further than his booming voice. Just like the others, until I tell you what you've been hiding all these years. The laughter died. 2 days earlier, Amara had materialized on the city streets like a ghost made flesh, her bare feet padding across hot concrete while grown men scattered in her wake. Her voice had carried impossible truths that struck like lightning, secrets that should have been buried deep. Your wife knows what you did last summer, she had told a man in an expensive suit, watching his face drain of color as if she had pulled a plug somewhere vital. You stole money from your best friend's wallet, she murmured to a shopkeeper whose hands began to shake as he counted change. You're planning to run away with her sister, she informed another man, her calm tone making the words all the more devastating. Each revelation had sent its target reeling. One man had screamed, "How do you know that?" before under his breath, until Amara turned to him with that same unsettling calm. You're still wearing her perfume, aren't you? The woman you see every Thursday. The officer's face had gone pale as winter frost. This kid is unnatural, his partner had whispered. What do we do with her? She keeps asking for Judge Randall. Let's take her to the courthouse. Maybe he'll know what to do. Now, standing in the center of his domain, Amara took another step closer, her bare feet soundless on the polished floor. You've hidden it for years, she said, her voice carrying the weight of absolute certainty. The thing you did, the one that still makes you wake up at night and sweat. Randall's smirk faltered like a candle flame in wind. You're lying, he said sharply, but his voice held a tremor that hadn't been there before. You're just a scared little girl trying to get attention. Amara raised her small hand and placed it gently on the crown of his head. The gesture was tender, almost benedictory, and it sent gasps rippling through the courtroom like stones thrown into still water. Don't touch the judge, a lawyer hissed, but Amara might as well have been carved from marble for all the attention she paid. Her eyes fluttered shut as if she were listening to music only she could hear. You didn't mean to do it, did you? She whispered. Randall's heart began hammering against his ribs like a caged bird. The blood in his veins turned to ice water. You pushed her. You didn't think the fall would kill her, but it did. The judge's face turned the color of old parchment. The room grew so quiet that the tick of the wall clock sounded like gunshots. You buried her near the river, Amara murmured, her voice dreamy and distant. You thought no one would ever find out. You became a lawyer, then a judge, and told yourself you'd been forgiven. Randall shot out of his chair like a man on fire. Enough, he roared, slamming his gavel so hard the crack of breaking wood echoed through the chamber. This is nonsense. She's making it up. But the girl didn't flinch, didn't move, didn't even open her eyes. Then why are you shaking? She asked softly, her hand still resting on his head like a blessing or a curse. The crowd erupted in whispers that grew to murmurs that threatened to become shouts. Is it true? What is she talking about? Someone call the police. Randall's breath came in short, sharp gasps. His eyes darted to the bailiff like a cornered animal looking for escape. Take her away now. But Amara spoke again, her voice louder this time, carrying across the chaos like a bell tolling midnight. You see her every night in your dreams. The woman you buried. The one screaming in your mind even now. Randall staggered backward as if he'd been struck, his face pale as chalk dust. How could you know that? He whispered hoarsely. Amara opened her eyes and stared straight into his soul. Because she's still screaming, the girl said, and I can hear her. The courtroom erupted into chaos. Reporters scrambled for their cameras like vultures sensing carrion. Lawyers shouted over one another in voices that cracked with excitement and horror. The judge's gavel slammed repeatedly, but the sound barely cut through the growing storm of voices. Order, Randall bellowed, his voice breaking like a teenage boy's. Order in this court. But his hands were trembling so violently he could barely hold the gavel. Amara stood still as a statue, her small hand pressed lightly to his head. You hear her too, don't you? She whispered, her voice eerily calm in the midst of the madness. Her voice, her cries, the way she begged you to stop. Lies, Randall roared, his face flushed red as blood, while sweat dripped down his temple like tears. This child is manipulating you all. I've never hurt anyone. Amara tilted her head, her braids brushing her shoulders like dark water. Then why can I see her? The judge froze as if turned to stone. You buried her near the riverbank, Amara continued, her eyes narrowing to laser points of focus. You thought the current would take her body, but the soil was thick. You covered her with rocks. Randall's legs wobbled like a newborn colt's. He gripped the edge of his bench, his knuckles white as bone. Stop, he hissed through gritted teeth. You kept her bracelet, Amara said louder now, her voice carrying over the gasps of the crowd like the voice of judgment itself. You put it in a box. It's still under the floorboards in your study, isn't it? Randall's head jerked up as if he'd been slapped. No one could know about the bracelet. No one. It was impossible, unthinkable, a secret he'd buried deeper than any grave. The room fell deadly silent, as if everyone had stopped breathing at once. A woman in the back row stood slowly, her face pale with dawning horror. What is she talking about? What bracelet? Amara's voice grew sharper, cutting through the silence like a blade, the one he ripped off her wrist when she scratched his face. The crowd erupted into frantic murmurs that rose like a tide. I want her removed now, Randall screamed, his voice breaking completely. This is slander. This is... She told me her name, Amara said, cutting through his tirade like a sword through silk. Her name was Claire. She was 24, and you promised to drive her home that night. Randall's mouth fell open, working soundlessly like a fish drowning in air. She trusted you, Amara said softly. But when she said no, you lost control. You pushed her. And when she stopped breathing, you panicked. You thought no one would ever find out. Suddenly, Amara gasped and staggered back, clutching her head as if struck by invisible lightning. She's screaming again, the girl cried, her voice cracking with pain. Her voice. It's louder now. She says she won't stop until the truth comes out. The judge backed into his chair, his hands trembling violently, his face a mask of terror and guilt. I didn't mean to, he choked out, the words torn from somewhere deep inside him. I didn't mean to hurt her. It was an accident. The room went silent as a tomb. Every eye in the courtroom turned to Randall as he fell to his knees, the mighty judge reduced to a broken man confessing to shadows. Claire was my sister, a young man in the audience shouted, tears streaming down his face like rivers of pain. You told us she ran away. You monster. Reporters shoved forward, with microphones thrust out like weapons. Lawyers scrambled to hold them back. The very air seemed to crackle with electricity and rage, and the terrible satisfaction of justice finally served. Amara slowly lowered her hand, her face peaceful now, almost serene. Her voice is gone now, she said quietly. She says she can rest. Within minutes, officers surrounded the judge like wolves closing in on wounded prey. You're under arrest for the murder of Claire Donovan, one of them announced. Randall's face crumpled like wet paper. I didn't mean to, he cried as they dragged him from the bench, his expensive robes trailing behind him like a discarded costume. It was supposed to be a secret. No one was supposed to know. Amara's eyes followed him coldly as he passed, and for a moment she looked far older than her 8 years. She always knew, the little girl whispered. She just needed someone to listen. As the gavel fell for the last time, Amara stepped down from the stand, her bare feet carrying her toward the door with the same silent grace she'd entered with. A reporter approached cautiously, as if afraid she might disappear like smoke. How did you know all that? Amara's lips curved in something that might have been a smile on anyone else's face. I don't just hear thoughts, she said softly. I hear the voices of the ones you've tried to silence. And with that, she walked barefoot out of the courtroom, leaving stunned silence in her wake like ripples on still water.